Hi everyone, welcome to the Your Life Unfiltered podcast with your hosts Kitu Kothari and Dean James. In this podcast, we dig deep into the life experiences of our guests to connect the dots between their early upbringing and what they're doing today. Today, we actually have a very special guest, Viral Joshi from season 2 of Indian Matchmaking. Viral, if you want to quickly introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I'm Viral from Indian Matchmaking season 2. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great, Viral. Thanks for being here. Before we go deep and talk about the show, but we want to go a little bit, a few years back. Just talk a little bit about your early childhood, early upbringing, any, key motivations or inspirations, anything that really stuck with you that, kind of molded you in a way that you think of yourself as of today.
Yes, so I'm based in North Carolina. I work in the pharma industry. Backtracking to my childhood, I would say my dad had a lot of influence on me growing up. I'm an only child, but he was one of 5. He was the youngest of 5. My mom's also the youngest of 5. But I think my dad, he just really instilled in me in early age the importance of being independent, the importance of being self-sufficient, and instilling confidence at a very early age. And so we started with like little goals because my mom was working a lot at the time. My dad had just come to America, so he was still trying to figure out the ropes and then start a job. So he had a big hand in raising me. And he would start with like little goals, like, okay, by the end of okay, we're about to go to bed. Like, you need to change your clothes, brush your teeth, braid your hair, do whatever. And then I would start slowly like accomplishing those things. And that gave me a feeling of like confidence. And then as I got older, that confidence stuck with me to obviously like larger tasks, like buying a home, getting my degree, getting a job, and things like that. So I would say he had a big influence on just developing me and shaping me to the woman I am today.
That's great. What about pharma industry? I know it's pretty kind of typical industry to get in. So was there any motivation? Was there any kind of inspiration from the parents or inclination from them to join pharma, or was it something that you figured out on your own?
It's something I figured out on my own. During undergrad, I got a job at an endocrinology clinic, and he was doing medical practice with clinical-based research. And so I was like, as I was working as a medical assistant, I started, just having a natural curiosity for research. And I was seeing what he was doing, and he was targeting like different enzymes for thyroid cancer. And then seeing the process of how it worked, I would slowly like get more involved. And it was just really nice because I enjoy science. I enjoy problem solving, the critical thinking, and obviously you're doing great things for humankind. And seeing him like eventually get published in the Thyroid Journal the summer of that same year I started working there was obviously a huge milestone for him and a huge milestone for the team. So that really motivated me to go into research. And I knew I didn't want to spend a long time in school. Like, I was done after undergrad. I was like, I don't want to go to grad school. I don't go like into medicine. I used to be an EMT for the state of North Carolina as well. So having that hands-on patient care, that's honestly what made me realize I don't want to do this. I need a substance in me and providing care. And I think that's important to explore, not only what you enjoy doing for a career, but also what's not going to work for you. So that was also a very pivotal thing that kind of kept me into research. And then I finished school, I came back home, and then on RTP, where I live, it's the research capital of the world. So an abundance of job opportunities here.
Got it. Fantastic. And just going off of that, I read somewhere that you actually also gave a speech on HIV and AIDS long time ago. I guess that was one of the big ones. So how was that experience, and what motivated you to do that?
So I have quite a few friends in, honestly, the LGBT community, and I know this is a stigma, and one of my best friends actually is a part of that community. And just learning about it, learning how we need to be more open about conversations that affect humankind in any sort of stigma, whether that's HIV, AIDS, depression, not being married at 30, like that's like a problem in the Indian community. We stigmatize that so much. So being a part of larger conversations was important for me, and just bringing awareness, because I think the more education and the more awareness you bring to a topic, the more the stigma goes away, and the more we can have more proactive conversations about how we're gonna, use these ideas that we have to propel humanity forward.
Got it. Great. Thanks for sharing that. As you said, it's really I'm basically seeing a theme of independence, but also being able to help people and just kind of impact lives in a positive way, which obviously you try to do with medicine, but also through these awareness programs that you just mentioned about. All right, so with that, actually, let me switch gears a little bit. So a lot of people know that you've been on the show, and that's where you've been famous from. But I believe, I don't know if many people know, but you've been on TV or movies before, right?
Yeah.
I'm on Iron Man as an Iron Man extra. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? How did you get that opportunity? And what was the experience? What did you exactly do with that?
Yeah, so it's kind of a serendipity situation. My roommate in college, she was a film major, and she comes home one
Oh,
day, hey, I heard Iron Man 3 is filming in our town. Let's go be an extra. I want to do it. Will you come with me? And then obviously I was like, sure, I'll go with you. No one really wants to do things alone. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll join. So we wait in the line at the mall, and it's like a 2-hour wait. I mean, it's Iron Man, it's Marvel. So of course, the whole town is there. So we wait in line. It's wrapped around the entire mall. We go in and they take our pictures. They ask us a few questions, and then we're kind of on our way. I didn't hear from them for several months. Neither did my friend. And then all of a sudden, I got an email. Hey, you've been selected to be an extra. Like, report here at this time. And I was like, okay, cool. So then I started. I went there. Well, I learned a lot about the film industry there, actually. So all the Marvel movies are filmed from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So you're doing a night shift. So I
oh
would
wow.
go class during
Really?
the day, and then I would go on the set in the evening. Very long hours. You're expected to be there almost all 12 hours unless you're dismissed early. And then the scene that I was in, I actually wasn't even supposed to be in it. So the way Marvel does their filming is you have a full set, and they keep the set live and active at all times. But the director is only focused in one area. So at any point, if he's like, oh, I changed my mind, I want to go to this part of the set, it's already active. So he can just kind of glide right over. So he's doing the set. Jon Favreau's on the opposite end of me. I'm over here, and I realize, oh, well, I'm probably not going to be in it because the director's obviously with Jon Favreau. And then all of a sudden he just like stops and is like scanning the set, and
Mhm.
he points at me and is like, you come here. And then he chose me to be the person who just walks in the background. And that's honestly how it fit.
That's actually really cool. It just happened that way. And actually, you already answered it earlier, but when Deepa mentioned that you were an Iron Man extra, the first question I was gonna ask is which one, which movie?
Yeah,
Because what would have been really cool is if you were in the first ever one, right? The first ever Marvel movie, which was Iron Man.
that would have been cool. But I do think the third one is the best. Maybe I'm biased, but the third one I think is the best.
Obviously, it's the best one. Yeah.
So, question then: are you a Marvel fan now, or were you before you even became an extra in the movie?
I was not a fan. I didn't really dive into the Marvel universe until I became an extra, which I know is like sacrilege in a way, but it is. I have an appreciation now, but a lot of people were like, "Man, I've been such a huge fan, and like I didn't get to go, but she got it," which sucks. And I mean that happens to a lot of us, right? In
Uh-huh.
whatever career it is, we might think we're a better fit or we have better interest for it, but it is what it is. It happens.
Absolutely.
So, I wanted to change gears a little bit, and I know that in your Instagram bio, you actually mentioned a lot about overpriced coffees. Is there
Yes.
any story behind that? Is like what made you become a coffee aficionado?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think just I'm just a big foodie in general. And then in college you start with like the easy pikes, the drip coffee, and then you start getting fancier with lattes. Then you want to add all these syrups and all these like different types of sugar, different, all these essences. And it just kind of build to this very complicated coffee order. And then you start getting comfortable paying $6 and $7 for coffee, which at the end of the day really you can make at home. And it's a guilty pleasure for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any specific flavors, or you like all flavors, or
I'm big on Americanos, like as like a basic coffee, but then when you get into more complicated ones, like Obviously, I think the chocolate caramel cold brew at Starbucks, I think that one's really good. Peppermint mocha, those are also really good. And then like the classic vanilla latte, I have to have that to start my day. Otherwise, I can't get jump started properly.
Okay. What about like seasonal blends? Like you have your PSLs, you have, like apple cinnamon, those type of seasonal blends.
I think seasonal blends are a little overhyped.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I do appreciate a good pumpkin and a good apple cinnamon every now and then, but it's just not something you can have every day, right? So I appreciate it a little bit when it's here, but then when it's time to move on to the next season, I'm also ready.
Okay.
Got it.
Uh,
One thing, sorry, this is one thing on this particular topic, as you were saying, like I'm a foodie in general, so that this basically rung a bell in my mind that from our like Indian lineage, right? I know you're Gujarati, and same with me. Ketul is Gujarati. I'm actually Marwari, but the food is a big part of our culture, right? How
Yes.
can you not prioritize it?
Oh, absolutely. Gito, what's your favorite Gujarati food?
I would say two, pani puri and pav bhaji.
Okay. Okay,
Is
classics.
that Gujarati? I don't think that's Gujarati, man.
Well,
That's more like
the name pani puri is Gujarati because you have golgappas, you have
Yeah.
puchka, and then you have pani puri. So the name pani puri is Gujarati, and pav bhaji is definitely Gujarati. So that one counts.
what about you, Viral? What's your favorite?
I love, and I said this on the show, but I love handwo. Dogra is always great. What else is like? Pav bhaji is always a great one. But yeah, I would say like I would definitely say handwo's in the top two.
Have to. Okay.
Yeah.
Like what variety do you use? Like what's it called? Gourd. I think the English word is gourd. Like fried gourd, or like there's different types of andwa you can make.
My mom makes it with like a cabbage.
A cabbage one. Okay,
Oh,
interesting.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know it was possible. But I guess.
Oh, dudhi. That was a Gujarati word. I was trying to think of the word dudhi,
Yeah.
which I think the
Oh,
English word is fried gourd. I think when you like no shredded and then fried. No, shredded and baked actually. Shredded and baked gourd.
Oh, gotcha. Huh.
interesting.
All right. So what about? So you're big into reading, right? Is there any kind of genre that's your go-to? And if so, what got you into that genre?
It's a little bit dark, but my favorite is historical fiction, and that generally gears, and I think it's just I don't know what it is, but the media seems to be very obsessed with it. But a lot of World War II fiction, historical fiction comes up a lot, and we learn it at a young age when we read things like the Anne Frank Diary in high school, or we read like Night by Elie Wiesel. And I think I just started naturally gravitating towards it. But plus, there's also so many options. I don't think there's another historical era that's as well researched as World War II. And maybe that's just because technology is better now, or we're just in closer proximity to that than any previous war before that. And I think just having a natural curiosity for how things were. And it's what's interesting about history is it always tends to repeat itself. And if you're not careful, that also means the negative things.
Wow.
Very good point.
I could not agree with you more on that, the last point, but also the historical fiction in general, because I'm also a huge fan of just history in general, but also like history, historical fiction specifically, and not the books, but some movies that really jumps out. The Pianist, for example. I know it's a little bit fictionalized, but also based on loosely based on a real story. Saint Pride Ryan and the one Flags of Our Father. So all of these are all my favorite go-to. So
Yeah.
I 100% agree with your statement there.
Yeah.
Yeah, to build on Deepam's point there, actually. So the one reason I think the fact that you mentioned that historical fiction is your go-to is really powerful is because the way that I view it is that when you like read through multiple generations of history, you start to pick up on patterns, right? And so the way that I view it is patterns are very, very powerful because there's three stages of it, right? The first stage is pattern recognition, where you can see patterns, how they've occurred throughout time. The second level of that is pattern utilization, where you're able to see those patterns, but then you're able to capitalize on it. You're able to see trends as they're coming and be able to capitalize on it, right? And that could be socially, it could be economically, it could be intellectually. There's so many different ways of that, right? Even artistically.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third trend is pattern creation. So once you've already understood how to recognize patterns. You've gotten a skill set to be able to utilize those patterns. The last stage is how do you set those patterns? And that's basically, in layman terms, creating a trend.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting. And I think there's a lot of power in understanding history and studying history because many people won't take that effort, that conscious effort to learn about history. They
True.
just view as history as irrelevant. Oh, it already happened. It's not really
Yeah,
important, right? A lot of people have that mindset.
we
But
do.
if you really dig into it, there's so much to learn from history because of I mean, said in another way, a lot of people say it's like the future, it's not always new. It's like an echo of the past.
Right.
100%.
Totally.
100%. Totally agree with it.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And was like history your favorite subject growing up in school, or like, what got you really into history?
I honestly I don't know what it is about history. It's definitely not. I did not like that subject in school at all. I was definitely a science person, or an English person, which I think is reflected in the passion for reading. But I think what's nice about history is I just love to relive different time periods through the lens of somebody else. And I think there's always so much you can gain from history in the sense of other people's past experience. And then you can learn from that. Kind of like how you said, like pattern recognition, and then being able to use what you see to propel yourself forward.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
no. Actually,
Yeah,
the other thing you mentioned is
yeah,
really good
sorry.
too. You mentioned being able to learn from someone else's experiences. And Deepam will probably remember this. I actually mentioned this on another podcast episode,
Uh-huh.
but I also view reading in general as like a shortcut, like a cheat code to life. Because if you think about it,
100%. I can't stress enough. Everyone's like, what is your key to success? I'm like, I read a shit ton and I learn from a lot of other people's mistakes and I don't repeat them. I completely agree with you.
yeah, and I'm just gonna build upon that thought. And what I was gonna say is the reason it's a cheat code to life is because if you think about it, someone had to accumulate decades of experience to have the confidence and the knowledge to write a book. And for
Yes.
you, just spending a couple hours to read that book, you
Mhm.
basically learn from probably 10, 20, maybe even 30 plus years of experience of someone else.
Oh,
And
for
that
sure.
especially holds true if you're talking about nonfiction, right? Historical fiction and all of other types of fiction, yeah, there's value in that, but even in nonfiction, if you have like a creative writer that has talked about nonfiction type of stuff in a very unique way, you're able to
Mhm.
capitalize on their expertise and learn from decades of their experience in a very short window.
Completely agree. I mean, I think that holds very true for nonfiction, but even in like the most trivial, like beach read book, like just something so basic and so mindless, I think it can also teach you empathy because you're putting yourself in that person's shoes as you're reading it. So, from a nonfiction perspective, you can learn a lot of like life skills and ways to cut corners. But then in fiction, you can also just learn how to be more empathetic, different other people's like the storyline plot experience could parallel something similar to you and you might get an idea out of it and that might be more fruitful.
100%.
Yeah,
Mhm.
makes perfect sense. I like that. And actually, this is a perfect segue to the next topic, which is dating, because you just mentioned life skills.
Oh, there's
And
there's no rule for dating. I've looked, I've read so many books, no one has the answer for.
yeah,
Right, right.
well, the
But
one,
before we go there, I just have a quick question, Viral, to something you said just a few sentences ago. Is just you like to relive, or basically the reading books allow you to relive, a historical time period or something that happened at that time. I have a question. So, if you were to be born or relive an era or a decade, which one
Yeah,
would you pick from the past?
I would go back to when like we had Maharanis and Rajas run India, and I would go back there. I just
Oh
I
my God.
everyone's seen like Bahubali movies, but just that like ancient kind of India, those big palaces, the like very royal and rich garbs, and just the rich culture there. That's it's been diluted over time, of course, because things just change naturally. But reliving in that and seeing that, I think would just be like a dream come true.
Wow.
good
Awesome.
choice. Any specific region or province or kingdom that you would want to target, or just in general, any of them?
I think just in general, I don't, unfortunately, a lot of Indian history is embedded with the British Empire, the Mughal Empire. So I just want to see India from a lens before all that happened to it, Like
Wow.
I think India's been through a lot as a country. And it's just, I want to go back to a time where there weren't those external influences and external pressures, and just see, like, where we come from as like truly authentic people.
Got it. Probably we're talking 1,000+ years ago, but I guess
Yeah.
within the 1,000 years, we've had a lot of people coming in from outside. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
With that said, so you mentioned a lot about history, living in history, like your favorite part would be like the Raja Rani areas. Would you consider writing about it? Because you love historical fiction. Would you ever consider becoming a writer?
I would have to see. One thing that would hold me back is the extensive amount of research I would want to do into producing something that accurately represents, historical India, especially because there's not a lot of research. When these empires came through, a lot of material and data and research and science and literature was destroyed. And so I think it's hard to understand Indian history from an Indian person without having those influences in there. So it would be hard to do the genre justification, but I would love to get into it, even if it's like, it might not be entirely accurate. It could be like, you know, influenced by history rather than like based on a true story.
Got it.
Okay, good to know. All right, any other questions, Deepam, or can we move to the...
Now we can move on. Sorry.
All right, so let's talk dating, right? So I know one topic that you're really passionate about is the topic of how to sustain relationships. Did you want to share any thoughts relating to that?
Yes, I think one thing, we all work so hard to find someone to be in a relationship with, but then I don't think because, we all have the relatable conversations where it's like, I hate dating apps. I got ghosted. I went on a date and it sucked. And, we all have that shared experience. But I think once we finally find someone, I don't think we talk enough about how to sustain a relationship and move it forward. And I think that ultimately we need to be talking about that phase of a relationship just as passionately as we talk about finding someone. And I think that'll prevent a lot of breakups, hopefully. I think one thing that it takes, and it's something I've learned with Ashay to sustain a long-term relationship, especially, is like communicate, over communicate. Like there's no other way to emphasize it. And then I think having a healthy mindset in your relationship, like if someone brings something that they, are not comfortable with, it shouldn't be an uncomfortable conversation. Like you have to keep yourself open and keep yourself receptive and understand that when someone is saying something that they, like, I wish you did this, or I don't like that you do this, not to take it in a negative light. And then I think that's what a lot of us do because we take it so personally. But I think if you just switch your lens to be like, okay, this isn't working and it's not about me, it's about us, and you approach it as a team rather than like a you versus me, I think that's a much more healthy way to propel a relationship. Otherwise, it's always going to end if you take things too personally.
That makes sense. Do you have any advice in terms of like specific things that can be done to help with communication, or to like anything you feel comfortable sharing, maybe personal anecdotes, whatever?
Sure. I think it's always important to keep your voice low. I think when you can get into an emotional conversation, as soon as someone's voice starts escalating, the tension starts building. I think try and be mindful of your body language. Keep yourself open. If you like are crossing your arms or like blocking or guarding yourself, the other person can take that in a negative way, and then the conversation could totally steer in a different direction. And I think that's also true in, in love relationships, in friendships, and even like work relationships. My motto whenever I feel like, the temperature is rising is to de-escalate, 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 and try and be as constructive about it as possible.
Okay, well said. I feel like you must have read a lot about the topic because of the way you elegantly communicated that.
I think
yeah.
A lot in general. Reading a lot makes you a better speaker. It makes you a better listener. So I think it just all stems from that. And I've had a lot of these conversations with my friends. I have friends who are single and I have friends who are married with like 4 kids. So I think it's always valuable to engage with them and get their perspective. And then that kind of helps me build my own thinking process when I'm like introverted or like introspecting and evaluating how I am and how I'm going to bring my best self to my relationship now.
Okay, fantastic.
That makes sense. So talk to us a little bit about the show, right? How did you get into this? How did you get started? Did you reach out to them, or did they reach out to you? And then what was the process? Just give us a setup.
This isn't like, some great story in terms of, I was out seeking stardom and it happened for me. So this isn't that type of story. This actually falls on the backs of Iron Man. So so while you're on the set of Iron Man or any Marvel movie for sure, they have amazing food. This is where it stems from, it is what it is. So they have amazing food. And at the time, this was like 10 years ago. We filmed the movie in 2012. It came out in 2013. And I didn't understand at the time that the production is probably just having a local vendor supply their food. I thought, this is Robert Downey, this is Don Cheadle, this is Gwyneth Paltrow. Surely these are like personal private chefs that are traveling all over the world with them. It made sense, right? It still makes sense to me. And I'm on the set one day, and then there are these crepes there, and they're the best crepes I've ever had in my life. I still have never had anything that good. And one day I'm waiting outside of a restaurant for my friend. He's like, hey, let's go eat here. I'm like, all right, cool. So I kind of save up. Like, I don't really eat that much throughout the day because I know I really want to like enjoy this food. And I'm waiting in the parking lot for him. And suddenly in my mind, those crepes come in. And I was like, let me get on another set. Like, I need to try and find these crepes again. And so I'm sitting in my car and I just Googled crepes. I Googled casting near me. I don't know why I didn't Google crepes near me. I Googled casting near me. Now the mindset, totally different place. But I Googled casting near me. And I guess just like the phone algorithm with technology, it knew I was a single Indian girl. And for whatever reason, I said near me, despite putting that in, the first hit on Google was Indian singles looking to date TV. And I was like, okay, I just clicked on it because it's the first thing that popped up. Sure. Maybe, since I put in near me, maybe there's probably like a state option, whatever. So I clicked on it. And as I was reading the description, I started putting it together like, oh, I think this is talking about Indian matchmaking because you're working with like a premier Mumbai matchmaker. Like, what other TV show could that be? Right? It's not very, it's pretty obvious. So I was like, okay, why not? I am single. I am looking for an Indian person. It was very important to me that they be Gujarati. They speak the language. Probably not going to find that on like Hinge or Bumble, So I was like, let me work with someone who truly understands why I value what I value versus, any other TV show like The Bachelor, where it's just very broad. So I needed a much more targeted approach. It made sense. I saw Seemanti in season 1, and I thought she did a good job finding matches. They look good on paper. Whether they work out in real life, obviously we didn't see anything in season 1 pan out into anything more than just like a first or second date. But on paper, I thought she did great. I felt like, what do I have to lose by trying this? I always say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So I was like, I've never done this before. What do I have to lose? So I did it. I applied for it. And it's like a phone call, a Zoom call. They meet your parents, and then they call you again, and then you get selected.
Wow. What a great story. First of all, it started from crepes. Who would have known?
Dude, from crepes, that kind of makes me feel like the universe kind of wanted this to happen, because I think if something feels like an uphill battle, maybe that's the universe telling you, hey, this isn't for you, or maybe try something different. But I think because this happened so seemingly effortlessly, it felt like this is how I was supposed to, meet, my person.
It was meant to be that way.
Yeah. That's actually very interesting. So yeah, I guess a couple of questions then. Go ahead.
Inspirational story of, I really wanted to go into acting and be a breakthrough star. So I worked really hard and I grinded it out. I wish it could be a story like that.
But you know what? I will take this over that because this is much more interesting. Oh my God. Okay.
And how did you like the show in terms of filming the show, in terms of the experience of the show, and then also the way that basically the the videos came out.
Okay. So the crew, they're very nice people. If anyone ever gets a chance to be on Indian Matchmaking and it's the same crew, I highly recommend it. They're very supportive, very encouraging. Like you can have private conversations with them and, know that those are not going to be leaked onto TV, which is great. They were also very accommodating. Like I was still working full time while filming this. This is not I was not paid to be on the show. So my career, who does pay me, that always took priority because I can't mess that up, right? So I was like, they were very accommodating with filming on weekends and on long holidays like that. In terms of the show, there's only so much you can fit in an 8. It's like what, an hour, 8 episodes for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
They filmed with me for several months. And so to condense all of that into 8 hours, which, it's not like it's one episode, one person. So it's probably like a few minutes sprinkled. It probably comes out to maybe like an hour. So when,
Right.
how can you condense like months of filming with someone to 1 hour and really actually get the full picture of who they are? That's just not going to happen. I think they highlighted pretty strong personality traits that I do have, which it is what it is. Like we all signed the paper. We all signed the lease agreement that says we're going to do with you whatever we want and you have to be okay with it. You signed the paper. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to be sympathetic after that I couldn't feel bad for myself,
Right.
So right, I'm just going to own it. There were some parts of my personality that I thought they came off much more stronger on screen than I felt like I was in real life, but ultimately those are things I said. So I own up to it. That's for sure. I wish there was a more softer side of me portrayed, but that didn't really come through, which is fine. I think we see me open up a little bit more towards the end after I meet Ashe. And I think maybe that's why they tried to create such a sharp contrast between, a very hardened individual in the beginning, not exactly welcoming to someone who, really let their guard down by the end of season 2. And then the story continues in season 3, which I hope you guys see a more softer side, but if not, it is what it is.
Oh, so does that mean filming for season 3 has concluded?
I don't know if it's concluded, but my story with them for season 3 has concluded as of now. So things are, with production, it's always up in the air.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I know you probably can't share any specifics, but is there any like general direction you can tell us about your story on there?
Yeah. So what's different about season 3 versus 2 is in season 2, you see me being a main character and Ashe being someone I go on a date with. In season 3, we're both highlighted and the relationship is highlighted. So we are like one unit going into season 3, which I think will be kind of cool for people to see, because I received a lot of feedback like, oh, it was great to see like a strong independent woman actually find her match on the show. And it's nice to actually see how they're going to move the relationship forward and have those, big milestone conversations. Because I realize as my relationship is moving forward, I don't know how to have a lot of these difficult conversations. I don't know how to have a lot of timeline conversations without, feeling like I'm putting pressure on the relationship. So I think if season 3 captures it the way I hope they do, I think it'll be a good conversation starter. And it might help a lot of couples decide or help open up conversation like, hey, they're doing this. And you can just turn to your boyfriend or girlfriend and be like, what about us? And then hopefully that can help other people move their relationship ahead.
Yeah.
So yeah, we hit some big milestones, some big things happen, and that's all I can reveal.
Now
Awesome.
completely get it. We're not gonna press for more, but thank you for that. It sounds like it's gonna be very interesting.
Yeah, I hope so. It was a great time doing it all.
Right. So I actually will one question, regarding the filming of the show. So during the process, right, you're in front of the camera, but also you have to be like your authentic self in front of a person, right? So you're not really acting, but there is camera watching, you're being recorded. So I was just curious, how was your experience, or how hard or easy was it to be your authentic self in front of the camera, while you're going through this dating process, which in itself is actually a grueling process.
Yeah, so the dating process with cameras around you is already pretty unconventional, but It's honestly not as weird as you would think. Sometimes the camera's like right here in your face, but most of the time they're pretty far away. And it's easy. They do a good job of just blending into the background, so you don't even notice them. So I didn't feel like it was that difficult or that hard. I don't, my first date, second date, third, yeah, I don't even, like, looking back, I don't even think they really felt awkward or uncomfortable. I think they tried to present themselves the best they could too. Um, and I think when you're dating, even if the cameras are there, you have to make the conscious effort to block them out, because at the end of the day, you're trying to get to know this person on a molecular level almost, right? Because you're looking to have that chemistry. And
Right.
so when the cameras are gone, if you're a totally different person, that's not fair to the other person if they're trying to get to know you, right? So you have to keep that in mind, keep that big picture in mind, and just do your best to tune it out if you are someone who does, feel a little bit uncomfortable. But no, I think production did a great job of not making it awkward at all.
Right. Wow.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, this sounds very interesting. But with that, it does open up a question, right? It's what's next for you, at least in the arena of media.
There are a few things. There are a lot of other production companies that have reached out to me for various projects. So I'm excited to see where that goes. But honestly, even if like media for me falls flat from here, that's fine too, because like I really do love what I do for work. My only goal going into this whole thing, believe it or not, was to get crepes, but to also like someone to date, and I do have that. So it's for me, it's a win-win. If something more happens in terms of media, great. If not, I still like achieved my goal that I was looking for, so I'm happy.
Got it.
Say, so do you get recognized by people at work or people on the street, like when you're walking on the street because of your presence on Indian Matchmaking?
All the time. All Yeah, and it's really interesting to see the demographic of who approaches me, because I thought a lot of only Indian people were going to be watching this show. Um, but an array of people from various backgrounds come to me and are like, "Hey, are you from the show? Can I get a selfie with you?" Or it happens a lot, in New York or North Carolina it happens, but it happens the most when Asha and I are together, because if you look at one of us separately, it could be like, "Oh, is that?" But then if we're together, it's very, it's confirmation that yes, this is that person. But it's cool. It was weird at first, because people, they see you on TV and they see so much of your life, because it's not like I'm not like a quote unquote side character. Like you come into my home, you meet my parents, you see my cat, you know what I do for work. Like, so they feel like they really know you. And so they tend to touch you, which is a little uncomfortable. Like I was walking by in a restaurant and a girl was at a bar and she just reached out and grabbed my arm. And,
Oh.
she feels like she knows me. She's like, "Oh my God, Viral." And I'm like, no, like I don't know. And that can be a little weird.
Mm.
For the first time it happened, it's a little jarring because again, they think they know you and they're touching you. So that's really in your personal space, right? But then, I texted production actually as soon as it happened. I was like, "Oh my God, like it happened." And she was like, "It's only gonna get like crazier from here." And then, when the show first came out, Asha and I, we went to a restaurant. You can feel people's cell phones on you. One girl was completely unapologetic and had like her full flash on pointed right in my direction when I was like out with my friends. And so that's a little uncomfortable, but again, it goes back as something I remind myself, I knew what I signed up for. I'm not gonna, sit here and complain about it like I should have seen this coming. So it's all right. You deal with it. You take it day by day.
Got it.
Okay, wow. That's interesting. All right, Deepa, I'm sorry to interrupt you earlier. Your question.
It's all good. So based on your experience with the show and just coming out of it,
Mhm.
what is that one or two myths that you would like to bust about the show?
I know a lot of people talk shit about Sivanti, but that I completely disagree with all of that. um,
Really? Okay.
yeah, to me, it's like, I mean, I'm not in the business of auntie bashing. Like that, to me, that's just a weird dynamic. I grew up as someone who's just always kind of had a respect for my elders, and like they're always going to be critical, they're always going to say things, and you just digest it. It's just an auntie. I wish people weren't so mean to her and so critical of her, because I personally felt like she was doing her best to help me. She was taking what I was saying, to heart. And because I noticed that every time I brought up something that I didn't like about a previous date, I could see that in my second date, she had made the conscious effort to remove or to address whatever thing that I had a concern with the previous person. So it made me feel like her and I were taking a team approach to this, which I think is important. I know I don't think it's fair that a lot of people are like, oh, Simanti, you need to dispel the myths of eons of dating history. Like, that's not her job. You know what I mean? Like, her job is to just look at bio data and match people to the best she can. And so I think people put a lot of pressure on her to address like these huge societal issues that we have. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's the right person to address those things. I think it doesn't take one person to address those things. We ought to address that as a community.
Right.
And definitely younger generations like us are going to be the ones to, create that change for the future. So that's one thing for sure. That doesn't digest well with me. I don't like that. Maybe I'm biased because she found me, Ashe, but it's important to have like both perspectives. I know some people, they don't, particularly like her, and I know some people who do, and that's fine. We all have our opinions, and they're all valid.
Right.
I don't think there's any other. I mean, do you have something you want to clarify from the show? I don't think there's any other myth. I'm trying to think. I think that's really the only thing that bothers me when I see it a lot.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's good to know. So we'll just actually wrap this series of questions up with this last one. Based on your experience with the show, is there anything you would like to tell our listeners? Anything in general, any general advice or any takeaways or anything?
General advice: if you're scared of something, just take the risk and do it. That can apply to career. Like, I used to work at a smaller pharma company, but I knew I had certain goals for myself. And then a bigger company came forward with an offer, and I was like, I have to take this. But I had a lot of hesitancy and nervousness going into it. But, I took the risk and it paid off. Same with dating. You have the option to put your whole life on display for other people to criticize and, almost ridicule, depending on what aspects or however, your quote unquote edit happens. But, I think I'm a great example of what it could be or what could happen, what outcome you can have if you just take the risk. So I think that's my biggest lesson and example to others, is just like, don't be afraid. You all have we all have like one life to live. So you have to live it to the fullest. And if, don't be afraid. That's it.
That's great advice. Yeah, 100%. Completely agree with that. Ketu, do you have any other questions? Otherwise, we can switch to the next section of our discussion.
I have a bunch, but I'm only going to stick to one. So
Okay.
the other thing is, I know you mentioned in your bio here that you're a Pilates fanatic. Can you tell us
Yeah.
about that?
Oh my God. So this is something I had to explain to Simanti. I was like, oh, I want someone who's active. And she was like, oh, okay, what do you mean? So I was like, oh, well, I go to Pilates, about 10 times a month. And she was like, where? And so I had to like explain it. I was like, it's kind of like it's like a yoga flow class, but there's like more weights involved. It's a lot less pressure on the joints, but you can get like a full body workout in. You can do like cardio with it. You can do like TRX with it. It's a very dynamic way to get good exercise in. And I think what's also nice about Pilates is as you're doing it, it incorporates stretching. So not only do you tone muscles, you also lengthen them as well. And I think that's very healthy to help also like retain your mobility. And I think that's something that is a big issue as we get older. That's why everyone's breaking their hip, because they don't have their hip flexors really opening and things like that.
Okay, wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
And
definitely. You guys should
yeah,
check.
I think we're good to move to the next section, Deepam.
All right. So, Viral, as the name suggests, rapid fire. First thing that comes to mind. All easy questions, no pressure whatsoever. I'll skip the first one because the first one is tea or coffee. We already know the answer to that, so we'll just skip
Okay.
that one. Mountains or beaches?
Beaches.
All right. Morning person or night owl?
Night owl, 100%.
All right. What's your favorite comfort food?
Spaghetti.
Oh, okay. What's your favorite virtue in others?
Loyalty.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
Tardiness.
I guess we know that from somewhere. All right. So, what's your secret superpower?
Ooh, the ability to introspect very well, or always being able to pull myself out of a rut by getting myself to a 50,000-foot view and reminding myself of the bigger picture.
Wow, that's
Like
amazing.
that. Okay. So like
Very helpful.
basically having a bird's eye view on any problem or challenge.
Yeah. And I think I had mentioned this to someone recently, actually, but I think in terms of mental health, I think what can be very depressing or get people into a depressive mind state is you're so focused on like what's not working for you, and you're like, oh, I didn't get the job, or I didn't get the husband or wife I wanted, or my career is like not going well. And I think if you stay so laser focused on like a little problem, it takes away the big picture. But I think you always have to remind yourself, like, this is one problem that you're going through. You will get over it. You will move past it. You've been through bad days in the past, and you've survived 100% of those bad days. So this is just another one in that list. And you just got to get through it.
All right.
Incredibly.
Yeah, fantastic.
What's a superpower you wish you had?
It could be unrealistic. So it could be any superpower.
I wish I could fly. I wish I could fly. I hate driving. I hate being stuck in traffic. Wish I
Makes sense.
Would you ever consider getting like a helicopter license or like a pilot license?
Yes and no. Yes, because obviously it it resolves my problem of having to be stuck in traffic or long commute times, but it's also not very eco-friendly. And I think all the plane crashes, unfortunately, that we see are these small private planes. They're not these big commercial.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to be aware of that.
That is that is true.
Not to be morbid, but it is like, those are the facts.
Definitely a fact. If you are not a pharmaceutical developer or what you do as a profession, what could you be instead?
I would have been a wildlife biologist in conservation, 100%.
Oh wow. Okay, that's a different answer. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna assume that means that you love to travel to wildlife types of countries, right? So probably, parts of Asia, parts of Africa, things like that. Like, have you visited a lot of places of that kind?
I would love to. Right now, I don't have the capacity for that. So I just donate to a lot of charities. One of my favorite charities is in India. It's called Wildlife SOS. They do a lot of great work with rescuing elephants that are used, for various reasons anything that they shouldn't be. So they're a charity that I strongly support. I actually have adopted an elephant, and I pay for her care monthly. But they also rescue bears and leopards, and they do a lot of education in the Indian community, or not Indian community, in India, the community over there. Just so there's more awareness. And what I like about them is they try and educate as many people as possible, so that when there are these wildlife and human conflicts, the humans are better to able to address it. So I think they're doing a lot of great work. I think there are a lot of wildlife reserves in Kenya that are also doing great work. So there's a lot that I would have definitely been more involved in if, pharma wasn't where I ended up.
Got it.
Makes sense.
All right. So last question in the series. What's been your biggest accomplishment in the last 1 or 2 years aside from the show?
Owning my house. I think that was the biggest thing. After graduating, I lived with my parents for 5 years. I can't say that I totally was scraping things together to make this home happen. I definitely had the support of my parents, because living with them, I was able to save up, all this money that I had for 5 years. Being able to watch the market and find that perfect interest rate right before COVID happened was definitely pretty pivotal. I can't deny that was something that was very pivotal to my success in getting into a home. I know interest rates now are pretty crazy, but I think that would be it. The struggle and the sacrifices that I made for 5 years to be able to put a good down payment on a home. I think that was my biggest thing.
Got it.
Okay.
Actually,
Well,
sorry.
Congratulations.
Congratulations on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I said last question. It's actually not a rapid fire, but did you finally get the crepes that you were craving that day?
No, I'm still looking for them. I might have to go to a Marvel movie now. Indian Matchmaking does not have crepes.
Oh my God. Okay. That's hilarious. Wow.
So if there's a generous podcast guest out there, maybe you can send Viral a gift card for crepes or something. I don't know.
Tell me where to go. Give me some restaurant tips.
Right.
Yeah. With that said, Viral, I did want to give you a chance to plug any social media profiles that you'd like to plug. So if you want to go ahead and share any of those.
Honestly, it's just mine. That's the only one. But also, again, like I mentioned earlier, Wildlife SOS. They're a great charity. They're doing great work, and I think it's awesome what they're doing, and they're great to follow.
Okay. Fantastic.
All right, Ketu, I guess we can wrap with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you're not already subscribed to us on Instagram or YouTube, please be sure to give us a follow. It's at Your Life Unfiltered on Instagram and also the same handle for YouTube. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Viral.
Thank you.